a couple of times in the past few weeks I've asked her to do that, change hymns just before. The reason I asked her to put that one up is I was kind of satisfied with my homily at the 8:30 service, but it seemed to me there was a piece missing that would lock things in. And as we were just beginning our worship time before, I was thinking, boy, that piece of music there that we just did locks it in, because it speaks of what it's all about, really. You know, like you're coming home to me, that our destination is with God. It's in eternity with Him. That's what we're shooting for. That's what it's all about. And our Sunday mornings together and our fellowship times together and all that we do together is just supposed to be a foreshadowing of that, you know. And I say that, I changed the introduction to my sermon because once this sermon is over, because it's going to be a little bit of an unusual one, I really want that to stick in our brains, you know, that's what it's all about. It's about our relationship with God, our relationship with one another, of course, and our community, but that's what it's all about, our relationship with God. That's where hope is, you know, and that's where love at its best is. Having said that as the introduction to the introduction, a number of weeks ago I was saying to you that my fall theme had to do with, I'll put it this way, our relationship with ourselves. I've been doing a lot of speaking lately about internal stuff, our internal life, our self-image, our relationships, things like that. And during the summer season, I was focusing on the church as a structure. So the structural one led into the personal one. And now, heading into Advent season, I want to develop that further and basically take those two, the integration of the church and what it's supposed to be, and I don't mean just a building, I mean the collection, the collective of God's faithful, with who we are as individuals and more especially who we're becoming as individuals, and relate that and connect it to the world that we're a part of, which can be a very confusing and messed up place, and see if we can make a stab at how to be effective as Christians in the world today and what the world needs. And I'm going to get there from a kind of strange place. It was in June that I last referred to Simon and Garfunkel's song where they say, the words of the prophets are written in the subway walls and tenement halls, you know, and whispered in the sounds of silence. That's my generation, you know. I am slightly post-hippie, but only slightly. And so I was basically a wannabe, and so I sort of lapped up that music as much as I could. And somebody once said that it was one of the sociologists that I studied in Sejab, that if you want to understand what's going on in the world, look at the artists, the painters, the authors, the musicians, the poets. They'll tell you what's going on in the world. When I first learned that, and I came to believe it quite easily, there was something that struck me. I was in my late teens at the time. That's what the church was supposed to be for. You know, that's what the church was supposed to be for. Interpreting reality to people in light of God's grace. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And then inviting people to participate in grace. However, the church sometimes seems more obsessed with its structures and its continued existence and than it does with the message that we're called to proclaim. And I think we can get lost sometimes. So every now and then, it's good to be reminded. And for me, not just because of who I'm married to, but because it's part of my soul too, music is the thing that speaks to me more of what God wants to do, and indeed sometimes is about the business of doing, than the others. I'm not much of an artist. You know, I'm definitely not a poet. But I'm something of a musician, so it makes sense that that's where things resonate for me. And so a lot of Paul Simon's songs and Simon and Garfunkel's songs really speak quite powerfully. And that one, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls. It takes a little wisdom for us to get with that, because you know, you drive into Montreal and you're seeing graffiti everywhere. It wasn't like that when I was growing up. But graffiti is everywhere, and it's easy just to dismiss it as vandalism and all the rest. But there's something to be learned there. And Paul Simon, because he wrote it, is asking us to consider what we can learn from the world around us. There's another medium that I like, and I'm going to talk about this for a bit, that to me expresses what's going on in the world, and even in a way that is sometimes a bit bleak and maybe hard to grasp, and that's motion pictures. And that's really what I want to spend about the next 5 to 10 minutes talking about. Often, in a way that we can't latch onto and hold on to tightly, movies speak to us as to what's going on in the collective unconscious. Movies speak to us of things that people are feeling, but having a hard time expressing. And I want to take you on a little bit of a ramble through that. I was born in 1956. So by the early to mid 60s, I was a kid, just at that age where I could start staying up a little late to watch some movies. And one of the things that my mother used to like to watch, maybe some of you did, but I really don't expect confession here, grade B science fiction movies. Do you remember any of those grade B science fiction movies? Wow, just smile if you do. They were horrible. They were really awful. There was one that I remember where there was a tarantula, a giant tarantula, and it got into a battle with a giant scorpion. That was the denouement of the movie. It was amazing. And do you remember those ones where it was like taking real close-ups of lizards and making them look like dinosaurs? The dinosaurs would fight each other. And you're all these little teeny tiny humans and all these mega monsters. And there was one that I really remember, and I used to have a thing, my mother used to laugh at it, I laugh at it now too. I'd be sitting on the couch, and as the thing would get scarier, I'd sort of creep more and more to the back of the couch till finally my feet were up on the seat and I was sitting on the back of the couch. The one that got me more than anything was the one about the ants. The giant ants. Walter, you actually remember that one?
Oh, I'm all with you.
Oh, good. And they had to get rid of all the ants. Now, I could go on just in this vein for a while, but I got a lot that I want to cover today, so I got to abbreviate this. You may remember in those grade B science fiction movies, there was a particular thing that caused all these mutations that resulted in all these insects and creatures becoming super huge, gigantic, killing off the whole of the human race and destroying the cities. If you remember, it was radioactivity. Radioactivity. Now, what was going on in the collective unconscious, or even consciousness at the time? Fear of nuclear annihilation. With the Cuban Missile Crisis, the armament of the Soviet Union, the doctrine of MAD, mutually assured destruction. Here's what we're going to do. Okay, Russia is going to have enough missiles to kill the population of the world 6,000 times over. The Americans are going to have enough nuclear missiles to kill the population of the world 9,000 times over, so it won't happen. Aside from the fact that humanity has never invented a weapon that it hasn't actually used, it's insanity. It's insanity, but that's where it was. When I grew up, Willingdon School, my elementary school, was 2 blocks away from where we lived. And I think it was once every quarter, there would be this sound, this siren, and it would get louder and louder and then fade, and then louder and louder and then fade, as it would turn. It was an air raid siren, because the fear was that the Russians are going to launch the nukes at us, And maybe some of you, were in school at the time when teachers were supposed to, during the air raid drill, get you to hide under the desk and cover your head with your hands, because that's going to help. Make it easier to box you and bury you. But anyway, but that's the world we're living in. But there's something about it that is so big, so drastic, so horrible. You can't really process it. You can't really internalize it. It was a collective fear, a collective unconsciousness, But we need to express it. And so the prophets of the day were expressing that fear in grade B science fiction movies. The fear that we had that the human race was going to be annihilated because of that. Okay? Now, times change and times move on. And by the time I was into my teen years, the world had moved on. And some of you may recall that grade B movies and even a couple of grade A movies started dealing with something quite different. Evil. You remember The Exorcist with Linda Blair? One of my claims to fame is that I went to see The Exorcist with Father Arthur Clausen, who was the curate at the church that I was a part of, and he went in his collar to see The Exorcist. Okay, that was cool. That was cool. There were a lot of people sort of hanging around with us, and asking questions and stuff like that. That was just the beginning, though. That was followed by Damien, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, The Omen, The Revenge of the Omen, The Revenge of the Omen's Omen, Amityville Horror, and all the rest of it. And just, hey, here's one of my personal claims to fame. A lot of years ago, I had the privilege of spending a New Year's Eve in New York City, staying with a guy who lived on Long Island. And he took me to the house where the Amityville Horror was supposed to have taken place. And it was all made up. It was all made up. It was made up, but it became a really good stuff. So this whole thing about evil and possession and being taken over by forces beyond your control, that came into the public consciousness. At the same time as, figure it, a war in Vietnam, undeclared, not really sure what it's for, not really sure when it's going to be over, kind of not sure what it's about, except them is bad. There was the fear of communism taking over the world and possessing the world. And there was the domino theory, which is a fancy way of saying they're out to get us. But the idea was that communism, being imperial, was going to take over the world, one country after another, after another, after another, after another, and we were all going to get possessed, right? And there's other stuff that happened too in the public consciousness to do with morality. The pill made an appearance, and all of a sudden, the idea of sexual morality began to be replaced by sexual expediency. It no longer was a matter of right or wrong. It was a matter of safe. Don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant. And that worked right up until the AIDS thing happened. The AIDS thing. What a terrible way to say it. So there was the sense that things are changing, things are moving and taking us over. There's things coming into the way we're thinking, and it just goes on and on and on. So what I'd like to suggest is whatever is going on in society in a mega or a mini sort of way is often reflected, particularly in the movies. In the music too, but I would say particularly in the movies. And so now there's a particular type of movie that has really gotten popular in the public consciousness. And the case that I'd like to make is that it is a reflection of the world that we find ourselves living in. Marie already knows the answer, so you're not allowed. What movies would you say cultishly are most popular these days? Liz, go. That was what Nancy said at the 8:30. That says something too. And you know what? Because of you, Andrew, I'm going to have to work on that one. No, but that's not the one. The grade Bs, the all over the place, they're coming out dime a dozen. Hunger Games is actually a good series.
You've got to have movies out there right now that have one guy who he's rising above the evil. He's rising above all that which is against it, but he's one man. I'm
going to refer to that directly in a little bit, but yes, you're right. Zombie movies.
Yeah. Cool.
Zombie movies. Go on Netflix or YouTube. Look anywhere. The number of zombie movies that you will see is absolutely phenomenal. Dawn of the Dead, Dawn of the Living Dead, The Revenge of the Living Dead, The Lying Down of the Dead and Rising Up of the Dead, the dead who are going to bite you in the head, the head dead. It's just on and on and on. It's just most of them are absolute just garbage. And the appeal that they have is in the grotesque nature of it, because there isn't a story as such. But there are so many zombie movies, and it'd be easy to say, that's just garbage, and that's what post-pubescent adolescents are looking at. I think that'd be a mistake. Let's take a look at what a zombie movie is about. And then I'm going to get into, connecting directly with what you said, Walter. Zombie movies, basically, here's what's going on. You've got ordinary people. They're never super rich, they're never super poor. They're ordinary working class folks. Sort of like us. Well, that's on purpose. The idea is we're going to identify with the group. So they're just like us. And then, we don't know where it came from. We don't know how it happened. All of a sudden, something starts happening. The zombies appear. And at first, you don't even know what it is. But the zombies appear. And they start turning people into more zombies. And pretty soon, it becomes a zombie epidemic. And there's no cure. We don't have the medicine to cure this zombie thing that's happening. We don't know whether it's a virus or a bacteria or an alien from another planet or what, or a weapon. Oh, and speaking of weapons, our weapons are useless against it. We can't stop it with our weapons. And so sometimes it starts in the Middle East, sometimes it starts in Europe. I've never seen one yet that starts in North America, but there must be. But it starts somewhere, and it just keeps spreading and spreading and spreading and spreading and spreading. And there is no cure. There is no cure. And everybody is susceptible, from the youngest to the oldest. And then what you see is a hero emerges. Not a group, not an army. A hero emerges. And at this point, I will put in a commercial for a movie called World War Z. Please watch it. Please watch it. It's got so many Christological archetypes, you won't believe it. Brad Pitt stars, so if you like Brad Pitt, or even if you don't, he is the Christ figure. He is the Messiah. He's living this nice, quiet life when all of a sudden he's needed because something happens. And then the rest, Jackie's smiling. You've seen it, eh? Oh yeah, we did, of course, yeah. Sorry about that. Senior moment. And so all of a sudden he's needed. And he's needed to do what? To save the world. And so he goes all over the place trying to find an answer. And of course it's a zombie movie. It's not the Gospel of John. But you see all these parallels in there. More and more people are becoming zombies. And they can't help it. They don't choose to be zombies. They're not stepping into zombieicity or whatever it's called. The zombies are getting them. And it's almost like, those influences out there that nobody ever says, oh yeah, I know I'm influenced by advertising. But we all are, otherwise they wouldn't spend billions on it. Well, we're all becoming zombies. And that's what the movie is about. And Brad Pitt goes and tries to find the answer to zombiness. And eventually, there's this one scene in particular that I just think is spectacular. And I would love to know if the people who put that movie together, he was one of them, actually have a faith and realized what they were doing. He's in a plane. Oh, I got to tell you another scene too, that's fantastic. But he's in a plane, and the plane crashes because of the zombies, of course, and almost nobody's left alive. And the next scene, it goes to dark, and then the next scene is Brad Pitt, wounded and bleeding. Does that sound familiar? With a piece of metal sticking out of his side. Does that sound familiar? Strapped into a seat about 15 feet above ground in this crashed airplane. Does that sound familiar? And the next thing he does, he takes off his seatbelt, rips out that piece of metal, crashes to the ground where he passes out. The next effective scene in the movie, he is lying on his back on a gurney, having been brought into this medical place. Yes, spoiler alert. He wakes up and wants to know where he is. Well, what you've just got is the crucifixion. You've got the the resting in the tomb, and then you've got the resurrection. What happens then? He is in the place that has the answer. He is in the place that has the answer. And so he eventually goes into this medical place and gets this virus and injects himself with it. And what it doesn't cure zombieism, but it makes you inedible to the zombies. It inoculates you from zombiehood. And so the next scene is he's isolated himself from all these zombies. The only way to test whether this is work, because he's not sure whether it's going to, is to open the door, let the zombies at him, and see if he gets eaten. And what happens? He opens the door, the zombie comes in as if it's going to feast, and then starts, and it can't eat him. He's no longer edible. Isn't that interesting? He's inoculated. Something has happened to him to make him invulnerable to the zombies. And then the movie ends with him in a boat with some other people going to this place where his family is. And what they have done is, get a load of this, they have made a safe, secure community that they are staying in until this vaccine is spread all over the world and there's no longer a danger from the zombies. May I please say that again? They form a separate community, separate from the zombies, in order to continue to survive until the vaccine has gone all around the world and everybody is safe from the zombies. Now, how do you not see Christianity in that? How do you not see it? The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and town halls. As bad as they are, I think the zombie movies are telling us something. So what's going on in the world? Well, we had World War I, the war to end all wars. Then we had World War II, which was kind of a different kind of war. But it was a world war. And then war seemed to change. Who the combatants were seemed to change. Who the armies were seemed to change. My mother said to me once upon a time, I don't think it was original, World War III will be fought with nuclear missiles and World War IV with sticks and stones. You ever hear that? Is it possible that right now we're living through World War III? And that's what the zombie movies are telling us? That this is World War III? It's not like World War I. Oh, that's how we think of war. That's what war is. An army fighting another army, and all the civilians cheering on their army, so that when the winner wins, there's peace across the world. And then World War II, same thing, but it's changed. It's changed. Is it possible that the definition of war, even world war, has to change? How many places in the world are there armed conflicts going on now? And I would like to suggest to you that one of the things that's going on in the movies that I've been speaking of, and there's other things too, but this is a sermon, it's not a book of the month club reading. There are other ways of identifying it though. That what people are intuiting is that there are forces of destruction out there that we don't have the resources to combat, that we don't know how to combat, that we feel ineffective in combating, that we feel are out to get us and are out to contaminate and pollute and destroy everyone and everything, and to turn everyone and everything into their own kind. And when we hear of radicalized teenagers and young adults, even on the West Island, that causes us a very deep, visceral fear that we often don't even have the words to articulate. It's there. The visceral fear is there. That there's something very, very dark and bad going on. And we don't know what to do about it. We don't know what the solution is. You know, we saw Paris last week. Belgium is basically in lockdown. There is a predicted imminent threat. Public activities are cancelled. Brussels is basically closed. There's something going to happen. There's something bad in the offing. And I'm not suggesting they're wrong, but it's just we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to handle it. And so we'll lock everything down. But you know what? We don't even believe that's going to prevent it. Because the zombies are out to get us. However you define the zombies. And until we have a Messiah figure that manages to deliver the vaccine, ... You get where I'm going with this. Another thing that I want to put in, I think it's important to put in. There's lots of things that these zombie movies, no matter how bad or how good, have in common, but one of the things they have in common is there is an absence in zombie movies of people taking care of the elderly and the young. You will notice that. Children are often zombified and killed, but there is very little taking care of the children, very little taking care of the elderly. Virtually nothing, unless he turns out to be the hero or she turns out to be the hero, taking care of the infirm or disabled. It's all healthy people. And I think that says something to our society too. That when it's in crisis, what we do is we hunker down and the marginalized get neglected. That's just a call to alert, you know. Not supposed to be that way in the church, but anyway. Okay, so you may think that what I've done is I've stretched things too much, maybe stretched it to the sound and going, I don't think so. Truthfully, I think I've understated it. I think we're just beginning to get to the point in our society where we understand that there is this fear that we can't even articulate yet. The fear of what is happening, what may be happening, despite our choices, despite what we might want. And that some of the idolatry that we commit in our society is the desire to say, that's what we really do want. We want reasonable wealth. We want to be stars. And, you know, some of the pedestals we put people on are a way of saying that's what it's supposed to be like. But, you know, it doesn't work. Where I want to go with this, you know, this is the Sunday next before Advent. This is the theme that I want to develop during Advent. I want to take this further during Advent. But to say that this is the place, like in World War Z when Brad Pitt goes back with his family. This is the community. One of obviously hundreds and hundreds of thousands of similar. But this is the community where we have been insulated against zombiehood. You know, to the degree to which we have accepted what we are promised by God. We are not subject to the zombies in this place. Every time we receive communion, the bread and the wine on a Sunday, and I'm not being irreverent here, and I'm not being silly, when we receive the bread and the wine, is that not what we're saying spiritually? That we want a different reality. We want Christ in us and within us and through us and flowing out from us. That we want this community to be a place that radiates something that the zombies can't get at. Right? So, the call is to enter into an authentic experience of our faith. To truly look at ourselves. Like Brad Pitt did in the movie. And see to what degree. Well, where do you stand? Where do you stand? Can I ask you to do some thinking about this? And think maybe like Lorne's just been watching too much stuff on YouTube, or maybe there really is something going on here. There's a collective fear that is happening. But as people of hope, we don't end with fear. But what we need to do is strengthen our communities such that in very difficult and turbulent times they provide an alternative to what is being produced out there. And I don't want to create an us and them thing. But it's a values thing. It's a what set of values that we're going to subscribe to. And then, as we attempt to live according to a different standard, to a different purpose, to support one another in it, and to be such a community where people who desire to be a part of it, who see the benefit of it, can be received into that community, welcomed into that community, become part of it. And that by being part of that community, we preserve. In the Dark Ages, they called it preserving civilization. Might be a little grandiose for now, but we preserve the essential truths that we stand for. Community, love, relationship, caring for one another, etc., etc., etc. So that even in the dark times, the light will shine. And then at the risk of terribly mixing my metaphors, when C.S. Lewis did his Narnia Chronicles, there is this image of when Aslan the lion, establishes the kingdom. The whole world changes, and this is a sermon that I'm going to do around Christmas time. But you know what? That's what our Christian hope is. Our Christian hope isn't only life after death. It is that, but it's not only that. But there will come a time, and we don't understand how it works. There's so much we don't understand, but we don't understand how it works. But where the veil between what we might call heaven or the heavens and earth no longer exists. It's called the kingdom. It's called the coming of the kingdom. And that all separations are gone, all barriers are gone. And the perfect comes. And even though you and I will not live to see it, it's in God's hands, but I doubt it will live to see it. It is our job to do the best we can to reflect the perfection of the coming kingdom in the lives we live individually, in our families, and in our community as well. So that's the challenge. So the next time you're watching a movie, or next time you got YouTube or Netflix up, just check out the zombie thing and see within the movie how many Christological archetypes you see and what it says to you about the world we're living in, and then latch on to the Christian hope and say, there's the answer. So, just some things to reflect about and think about as we do the last Sunday before Advent, the preparation for the coming of the Lord. Amen for now. Let's pray. God, there's so many people that are searching and wanting answers in a very confused and confusing time, and often not knowing how to go or what to do, without being elitist or exclusionary or any of the things that we don't want to be. God, this is to be a community that shows the way, that embraces people wherever they're from, that vaccinates against zombieism in its many forms. So I pray for St. Mary's. I pray for your church, for a faithful witness, for the leaders of the church, for those charged with holding and administering the vaccine. And I thank you that no matter what our circumstances, no matter what is going on in the world, you are there for us, giving peace and comfort and love. God, I pray for people who are struggling, either with health issues or relational issues or just where they fit issues. Grant grace. Grant peace. And God, I also pray for our kids. It's so easy to get derailed these days. Pray for them. Thank you for this opportunity to gather together, to think and to pray. Thank you that we can come to you and receive of your love. In Jesus' name.